Okay, hi. So today we'll be learning how to save data in Spring. So we will be using Spring data to save data, and we'll be using MySQL as a database. Now, in this case, we could have used anything. We could have used Postgres or anything else that you want, but then anything that Spring Data and Hibernate supports. Okay, so we'll be using MySQL because it's pretty ubiquitous. Everybody knows about it. So let's just get that thing done. So I'm assuming we all have MySQL installed. You could just Google it, MySQL download, and go to the downloads there, and basically the same stuff. You can just go to the if you download the community version though. If you download the community version, this one community server. I would recommend this MySQL installer. It is very good. You can find tons of tutorials for that. The version doesn't really matter for us right now. Anything above 5 will do. So this is 5.7, but even 5.6 works just fine. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I have got my Spring application up and running. So just the basic stuff is done. I've added this folder structure and I've created a new new Spring web application. You can see my POM file has nothing but the Spring Boot starter web. So when you select when you go in the file and you the same way you go here, Spring Starter project, what essentially happens is when you create a new project and you select things in here, you're just adding these things into your format.xml file. Right? We've discussed this earlier. Just a refresher. So now going back to the actual stuff in here. Sorry. Okay, I'm switching a lot. Okay, so the link for this guide would be there in the Blackboard. You can have a look at this one. This is a very good tutorial. It is by Spring Guides. Now, again, one more thing. If you go to spring.io, this website, and you go to the guide section of in here, you can see tons of guides, and you can refer them. They're mostly correct, but if you have some issues, just ping me or just Google. It should be fine. So you should read this article. I'll be explaining the parts that I feel would be difficult to get, or some things that are not disclosed in this document. And you should read this document though. It's pretty straightforward. Now to create these things, right? The sudo my this is again, so it's for Linux. So you have to do this. We don't have to do this because I'm assuming we all have MySQL installed. So assuming MySQL installed, I can go to MySQL, and in my users, I'm going to my users, and you can see I have so many users with me. I'm just going to add an account. I'm going to make the account name as, I don't know, media application, and the password would be anything CSI. Apply. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new database for working with our application. So I'm just going to delete this one because yeah, the only reason I deleted it is because I had it already in my system. So you can just right click on your create schema. You could name it like Spring. I want to give it, I don't know, just because I want to name it to Spring. You could name it Media App, whatever is your app name. I want to make it Spring. Apply, yeah, finish. So we have the Spring here. Now, very important step. Go to the user that you just created, the Media App. Go to schema privileges, add entry. Now, basically, what we are doing is we're just giving the permissions for this user to uh, have access to this database and not to the entire root thing. You could use the root user, that's fine if you are okay with it. Now, ideally, what we're going to do now is since we have the username and password, I'm just going to enter my environment variables. Get in here, create a new environment variable called as db underscore user, and the username I created here is media app, so it has to be media app. Now we are doing this only because we want when we deploy it onto AWS. All right, we want these things to change to RDS. So we want the application to talk to RDS. So you can just set these environment variables in your AWS instance, and we are ready to go. Okay, done. So yeah, I have my DB user and the DB password. I'm gonna say okay, okay, and make sure to restart your STS after this one because we need to do that. Otherwise, he needs to load the environment variables, right? We have multiple ways of importing the data. Like you can just, if you don't want to use this environment variables, you could have like copied, not included this and then copied that properties file. But what happens is as your project progresses, right, the properties files becomes bigger and bigger. So you cannot really copy paste it every single time you deploy your application. So what you do is you just you tell the Spring properties to just refer to your environment variables. Okay, so you can follow this link on my just again the same one which we had. Now here we have added these two more dependencies. The first dependency is Spring data, which just bringing Spring data, and we're using MySQL connector because we're using MySQL. I'm just going to go to my demo project here, go to my form, make sure that in my dependencies, I have all of these mentioned because we're using Tomcat, we need JSTL as well, and we can add AWS, JJ, but I think you must have had this earlier and we don't need it this time. So anyway, I can just copy paste the entire thing. But make sure you have it like only once. Okay, save. That's it. We are done. So now this should, on the right hand, you can see this building workspace on the right uh, bottom corner. So if it doesn't work that way, sometimes what happens is this Maven thing has the file gets corrupted while it is downloading or saving. So if this doesn't start up or it gets it goes into some errors. The most simple way to do it is just open your uh, this thing, go here and type user profile. This will open in your home account, your home directory. You see this m.m2, right? You can just close STS and then delete this directory. When you open up, it should just start again. Okay, or you could just do a right click, Maven, and then update project. Even that works. Now what we're going to do is we are just going to well, we updated the pom file. I'm having a look at the application.properties file. I'll explain it later. Okay, here. First of all, why are we doing this? Point number one, it's mentioned in this article. You can see here Spring Data Hibernate. We are telling Spring JPA and the Hibernate to use DDL auto. That's like the data definition language to be auto. So what it does is you don't need to create a table for this. He says that it can be auto. Now this can now. One, two, three. Yeah, I'm there. So this is the first article. This is the second article to deep into JPA if you want to. We'll talk about it later. Spring Data Repository later. In a database for your application. Let's just click on this. See here, this is a documentation for database initialization. You can tell Spring to automatically generate the tables for you. It takes these values, none. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, okay. So it takes these values, validate, update, create, drop. You can Google about their meanings. It just none is it doesn't do anything. Validate, it just validates, updates the record. If updates the table, if it's not there, creates and this create drop. So it creates while you started, drops when you did it. Done. So that's all we are doing here. We are just telling again the prefix for our JSP files, suffix for our JSP files. We're telling it to use MySQL 5 dialect. So we are telling the Hibernate to use MySQL 5 dialect. Okay, this is your data source URI. So this is your host. This is your port. This is your database name. Now this is Spring here because I created Spring in here. Okay, so because it's Spring here, it's Spring over there. You could name it anything you want, ABC or whatever. This is the username, right? And we want it to take the username from our environment variables. So I'm just going to do it like this. Whenever you have a dollar sign and then this thing, it takes it from the environment. So that's it. That being said, I think we are mostly done with our setup process for getting it started. Now, again, when we proceed, okay, it explains the things in here. Let's just go down. Now, he says to create an entity model. So we are going to create an entity model. What is entity model? It's just a class. Okay, I'm just going to click right click, new class. Sorry, my bad. Right click, new, and then class. I'm going to call it student. Again, please follow the naming conventions. Save. Now, student is an entity. So, entity is like basically a record in your table. So, if I add entity to it, make sure you add these stereotypes as you go ahead, and it has to be Java persistence. Okay, not the other one. In here, you made this class, all right, and you will be saving that class. Excuse me. Okay, just a second. Okay, so what happens is now this student, now the table you'll create will be student table. Okay, and if the student table you wanted to have an ID, a name, and an email. So what you do is you can see it in the article. It says the ID, the name, and the email. You could have anything you want here. So what we are doing is we are actually mapping a row to an object. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this one. It has to paste in here. So what we are doing, what we are telling the generator is the DDL generator is that I want this ID to be an integer and it has to be auto. So we need to increment it automatically, right? And it's an ID. Now I want this is a name. Now there are multiple things you can play around. If you see this link in here, the data JPA, and also if you just Google about JPA tags or like JPA unique constraint, you can have these constraints. So what we're doing is instead of defining the schema of a table, right? Like in SQL, we are using just Java to make it. So as you can see here, is this like Spring username? I'm just going to copy this column. Unique is equal to true because I want this email to be unique. Now what you do is you have to have these getters and setters. Now getters and setters are just functions which get and set the variables. So right click, you can go on source. And so on getters and setters. I'm going to select all and okay. I'm done. Now I'm done with my entity class. Now going forward, create the repository. Now this is the beauty of it. It gives you most of the code inbuilt. So the repository is an interface. So here it's an interface and not a class. Yeah, so as you can see, this extends a CRUD repository of type user and long. So this user there. Okay, so this CRUD repository in here, as you can see this one, here this extends a CRUD repository of type user and long. So he has taken it user because the entity is user. All right, you can see the entity.
Okay, so we were at the entity. So we created this entity, right? And we have this user repository. So this is like the convention you need to follow. This is your class name, okay, and this is also your class name. This can either be long or an integer. Okay, I'm just going to go to my class. I'm going to import this CRUD repository. It has to be a student. Okay, now for this student, so we want to do all the CRUD operations on the student, right? So we don't need to write any code. We don't need to do like insert, update, delete. No SQL here. I'm just going to make it integer because we declared the ID as integer back there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, let's say I want to have a few methods. All right, now let's just see that later. Okay, so it gives me some methods by default and I could add more. So let's say I wanted to have something like to find, to just find everybody. I just want to see who all are there in my database. I'm going to find all, and it should return a list of student. All right, so I mean it does make sense. We want to find all the students, so that's all. We can just find by email. So the convention goes this way. The convention is this way, that it's like find by, this remains constant, and then you get email, so the E is bigger. The conventions and all you can read in somewhere in here. Just a sec. You see here, it's like find by last name. Thing is explained in here. You can have a look at that. That should be easy. I'm closing this interface now after saving it. Obviously, I'm going to create. Now comes the controller, or actually you shouldn't write this in controller, but we should not write this in the controller, but we're just doing it because I want to demo it. Now if I copy this one, again always stereotype things before. I forgot to stereotype my repository. It doesn't matter because I'm extending it, but it should always stereotype. I'm sorry, it should be repository. Should always, whenever you create something, the first thing you should do is stereotype. It saves a lot of trouble later. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a few views. I'm just going to go to my main web app, this one, new, other, JSP, next, JSP, next, this one should be fine. I'm just going to make it, I'm just going to add everything, and then boom, it's there. So what I did here is, okay, first of all, point number one, if you don't, the reason I mentioned about this being so important is because if I remove this one, see what happens. If I just okay, let me just undo that part. I'm just going to copy this one, oops, okay, one sec, copied the wrong one. Okay, so we need to do is, first of all, I changed this to doc type HTML because otherwise the placeholder doesn't work, because this is not supported there, so we need to make it 5 HTML5 thing. So again, we have this thing done. So and after that, it's a simple thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import what we call. Okay, I'm just from scratch, I guess. Yeah, this was for what I got, right? I'm just going to make it something like. Okay, anyways, I just explain anyways. This is, I just imported Bootstrap. That's it. I got a container. See, in a container I have a row. In that row I have this form. Now what you can do is, it's all right to just go to getbootstrap.com. you go there, you go to the documentation part, you see the forms. Okay, you click on forms. Now if you want to get this form in your app, just copy this part and paste it in here. Now make sure you remember this. Here they don't have the names set, as in it's only ID, right? But our applications always work on the name part, so you make sure you add this name column, this name attribute, and just name it whatever you want. So my form is, the action is going to student/add. So this is the route where my post will happen. So whatever you type in the input, this input and the second input will go to this address as a post request. So and now I need to handle that post request, right? So let's just render this index page. What we want to do is we just want to create a small page. We just want to create a small page which will allow us to add students and then remove students. Okay, I am going to done. So import this one and then import this one. Okay, done. So what we are doing here is okay, let me just show you what we are planning to do. Give me 1 second. So in here what we want is here we just want to render this index page. This is pretty simple code. So this will just render the index page in here. Okay, so in this index page we have a form. This form takes some inputs, and we want to save these inputs in our database. So we need to save like a table, and the table has columns like email and name. So what happens is when you post to this address, alright, now I want to handle that post request. I already explained how the requests work. So I'm just go to my controller. I'm going to basically add some code in here. So what we are doing here is import post mapping, import request parameters. What is happening is after we create this repository, right, we want to make this one. So okay, this is kind of complicated. You can read through this for sure, but because it runs on the command line, so please just ignore this one if you're following this tutorial. It's kind of not required for us. Oh sorry, this is not the one. This is the JPA one, right? I want the Excel MySql one. Okay, so we are done with the repository part. Now we're creating the controller part, right? The controller part, as you can see here, again, this means it's a controller. Forget about this, please. We are auto wiring. So whatever we created this repository, right? This student repository. If you want to access this repository into this class, you don't need to create an object. You don't need to create anything of that sort. You just say auto wired and then explicitly set as private anyways. So you have the student repository instance given to you. So now any method in this class has this student repo variable set. Alright, so what is happening here is again we are getting this from here. He got the user repository, we got the student repository. He's mapping the get to add. What he wants to do is he is mapping the /add. So whenever something comes like your website /add, he wants to run this function. In this function he wants to have a request parameter name and the request parameter as email. Now as I've mentioned in a request, alright, you have something like when a browser sends a request to your server, it can send some information with it. So whenever this form, it sends a request to this address like for /student/add, what is happening is it is the request will go something like email and is equal to whatever the user types in this input bar. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to access those things. So what I am doing here is @request param. It tells now these are the things that you give to this function. Alright, so you can see here this when something posts to this route, I want Spring to run this function. Now this function wants two parameters in that request. One of them is email and the second is email and the second is name. The reason I've done this here is that I want to explain one thing. If you want to have one parameter that is required, as in let's say your application does not work, if like this route should not work if the name is not given, then it has to be required is equal to true. So if it is if somehow you don't give it, if it is false, then this route will not be called, as in it will throw an error to the person. So what we are telling him here is very simple, that if we want a request parameter, the name is name, as in it can be first name or whatever. I'm just calling it name, and you get that name from that request and give it to me in this string. It's very simple. You get this email from this request parameter and give it to me in the email. So you can see this email, if you just make these variable names same, so if it's the variable name here is same as the name field here, name is equal to email, so Spring will automatically do it for you. So here so when I enter this function, I know that I have this email and name set. Okay, now what I'm doing here is I'm just going to create a new instance of student. I'm going to, in this new instance, set the name as this name, set the email as what the email that we got, and then student repository dot save, and I'm going to pass him this object. What happened is Spring took this student object and he stored it. He will store it in a database, and you don't need to worry about how it's done. It's just done. After it's done, I'm just redirecting it to something called /students. So why /students? So that okay, fine, for now I'm just going to make it index and save it, so that we just let's just have a look. Okay, let's just have a look. Let me just see here. I've set everything up. Let's try running it. Run as Spring Boot app. Okay, if I go to my local host now, I should see a form. Okay, I see a form. If I enter something like this, and the name is Ninad, and if I say submit, right, so see it got posted to this address. All right, now if I open my MySql database here, and if I refresh this one, see there's a table that is already created for me. I don't need to do anything. This table name is student because the class name was student. Now if I see what is inside, you can see ID is 1 and the email is Ninad and the name is Ninad. Okay, so what happened is when I posted this, when I click on submit, the request went to the server created this record. So the server created this student object with my name and email in it, and then it called the save function on it, on the student repository dot save. You notice how you did not write the code for the student repository. Okay, it did it for you. That is very important in this context. Okay, what happens is when something like this happens, we kind of tend to get confused as to how this happens. But we need to make sure to understand, that the student repository has already some built-in methods that you can just call. Now what I want to do is, when I save the student, I want to see all the students. So what I'm going to do is, whenever somebody gets on, let's say /student, I want the thing to show all the students. So I'm just going to type in. So my bad. Okay, this happens. Make sure you import the right list, by the way. Yeah, so whenever, now I'm telling Spring, whenever somebody gets sends a get request for /students, run this function. What this function is doing is, he's calling the student repo app, or the student repository class, and he's calling something called as find all. Okay, now if you go to the student repository, we defined find all here. Now how you do it is his point of view, MySql find and all, and he gives a list of student. Okay, now find all gives me a list of students, plain and simple. It says mv.add object, so I'm just adding a students object called as students, and I'm adding this, passing this, and I'm just rendering this all students view. I'm just going to create a all students view, new, and then other JSP file. Okay, now I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff here. Very important stuff to be noted. I've added the C parameter. As you can see, the tag library. Okay, I'm calling it as prefix this, so it is the JSTL commands. You can Google it off. I mean, it's just that way. Now these are some tag libraries. So we have something called tag libraries for Spring as well. You could use them, but in this we are not going to use it. You could check out these additional links I've provided. So this guy talks about this in a very good depth, when you can go ahead and read about it. So if you use the tag libraries, right, you don't even need to map it, like we've said at the request param. You don't need to do that. You could just say form. You could use the form and the Spring thing, but then we're not going to, because it makes things a little bit, this makes things a little bit simpler. So now what happens is, this page gets loaded. I loaded bootstrap again bootstrap code. Here I've created a container, and in this row I'm just adding like oops, my bad. Okay, it's the wrong file. Again, I added this C C tag library is the JSTL thing. Change the title. In my container I have a row, and the row has a table. Okay, now how did I get this table? It's pretty simple. What you do is I'm just going to delete the table for now. Go to getbootstrap.com, type tables, and you basically copy and paste this code. If you want this table, copy and paste this code. Want this table, copy and paste this code. It's so simple. Alright, now what I'm doing is the thing that I'm changing here is that you can see in this table we have something like a table headers, and then I have table row, table row, table row, and table row is repeated for all these things, right? So I'm going to repeat. So C for each. It is like the J still has for each, like a loop thing. So for each students, which is as access can be accessed as student in this scope, I want to repeat these statements. Okay, I want to print this statements, this tr, and then I'm going to go C out. Again, we're just printing it out. What do you want to print? Student.id. Now get it, this student is this student entity. So student.id would call the getID function in the student class. Okay, and it will get the IDs. Okay, the student ID, name, and email. Now it will iterate over all these students in here. Now let's say if I want to, after I add this, let's say instead of showing the home page again, I just want to show the all the students. Okay, I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to is in here. So redirect /students. So I'm going to redirect the person. Restart Spring. So now I need to look at the database. Now it should be visible outside. I go to my local host, and if I add submit, you can see number one here. If I go back, and if I add something like computer submit, see one is this one, second is computer. Okay, and it goes out this way. So it's printing all of them. And if you refresh this table in here, you can see the two records back in here. Notice when I stop it, everything gets destroyed. All tables are gone. So that's like it does it for you. Okay, that's a good thing. You could turn it off, by the way. You can use the DDL auto and you can turn it off. You can read about it later. Now that's it. Actually, that's how you save a record, and that's how you retrieve a record using find all. You get all the records. Okay, now let's say I want to get a specific record. Let's say I want to get the student with the ID as 1. So for that, I'm just going to add another route. I'm just going to say, whenever somebody does gives me, let's say in a route in here, at student, at this route, just a sec. Yeah, okay, so you can see whenever I get a get request at /student, I want the ID to be there, because does it make sense to you now? Because I want the ID to be present when somebody calls /student. Okay, so otherwise which student should I return, right? It creates ambiguity. So instead of that, I'm just going to say the ID is required field. Now so what Spring will do is he'll get the request, and from that he'll get the ID thing, and he'll store it in the string called as ID and give it to me in the function. Now I'm just going to add a try and catch statement here, because what if some lookup fails? What if you don't find the person? Then Spring throws an exception. Okay, that's why it's in try and catch. Now this another thing. This is something really awesome. This find by ID. Notice how I did not write it in here, but Spring still gives me, because as you can see, if I click in here, you can see these things in the CRUD repository. It gives me so many things. Like save is inbuilt, save all is inbuilt, find by ID is inbuilt, exist by ID is inbuilt, find all is inbuilt, but we overrided this method. Okay, just forget about that. Find all by ID is inbuilt, and some things are inbuilt, because delete and all, these are all inbuilt methods. I'm just going to call this find by ID, and it gives me a student, as in, obviously, if I find a student by ID and I pass the ID as in integer.parseInt, I should get a student. The problem here is that what if the student is not there? Okay, so this is like an optional thing, so it's like an optional parameter. As you can read more about it. It's like if present, then you can say if the result is present, then do this, otherwise to do this. Now in this case, I'm just calling it else. If it is present, then student s is equal to result dot get. So whatever student you got from here will be stored in here. Okay, now again, I'm just in my model view, I'm adding an object called as student, and I'm loading a view name called as student info. So let's create a new JSP file. Okay, okay, what I did is, you can access the student from here, right? So student.id, name, and then email. That's all. So yeah, that's it. And if the exception ever comes, I can just add an object called as error, student not present, and the set view name as student error. So I'm just going to create a new view again. And I'm going to copy and paste some code in here. So in this code, okay, what is happening is I'm just printing out the error. You see out and the error, and that's all. Now if I run this one, okay, now if you see this one again, if you refresh the students, notice there's nothing because it deleted it. Okay, if I add computer and I say computer submit, computer is there. I go back and I add Ninad and I say here submit. See, these things are there. Now if I do forward student, right, we defined this route, right? If you remember back in here, we defined this route as this one, right? So I'm going to go back, student question mark id is equal to 1. So it prints out, so 1, the name and the email. If I say 2, yep, it prints out. If I say 3, student not present, because the id did not come here, and you can see it threw an error. Alright, see, it threw the lol error which I created. I just created a lol error, right? This one, see, if it's not present, I just wanted to create an error, throw an error, so you can receive it in here. So, and what if I don't give it the id, alright? Then what happens? It is just not going to show. It says this required parameter id is not present. So it just allows you to have a mandatory field in there. Another part, now let's say I want to do something like this. Instead of an id, let's say I want to have find by email. I'm going to dot find by email, and I'm going to pass in the email. I'm going to call it email as well. As you can see now, the data type of this is not this one. Alright, so it is just a student s. I'm going to remove all of this part code in here. Then what is going to happen here is, if this fails, right, he's just going to directly invoke this try and catch thing. He's going to directly throw an exception. Let's just see that. I'm just going to compile it and I'm just going to show you that again. That's it. Now if I run this one, again, one more thing, since we had the unique constraint, right, so this should fail. Yep, this is failing, right, because it is constraint violation. So this is very important thing to know. You could do this without writing any lot of SQL. Submit. Now I have two email addresses. If I do /student question mark email is equal to @email.com. Yep, he found it. Now what if he doesn't find it? If I just say something like 3@gmail.com, again it goes into an exception because it triggered a very bad exception. Okay, see, MySql integrity constraint violation except duplicate entry. Okay, that's what, because we did that one. Okay, wait, did the application crash because of that one? Let's see all the students. Oh, my bad. See, the email is not present. Students enter. We have all the students in here. So if it is student false question mark email is equal to ninad@. Yeah, that works. But if I scroll down, okay, if I say ninad2, ninad2 works. If I do 3, it's not returning anything. That's strange. Oh, because it's null. My bad. So because s is null, right? So you can just say if s is equal to null, then new exception. So some exception name here. If you want to give it custom names, you can just do that. Let's see if this works. Okay. Should be not present. Exactly. So he raised this exception, whichever we declared in here. This SS something. This exception which we declared, and then he did that stuff. Yeah. So mostly all the exceptions are taken care of for you. That's why he didn't raise an exception. But if in case it, because it's just like you don't want to mess around in a real-time application. Like we don't want the application to crash if it doesn't find something or something goes wrong. So usually for safe, we don't need this thing, because it is taken care of already. Even for find by ID, it's not required. Find by anything else, right, it might fail. That's why we need add a try and catch out. Find by ID, save, it's fine because they're inbuilt methods. All right, this is what you're telling him. You could do something like really, you can be really creative. Sorry, you can be really creative. You could say something like one thing. Let me just show you in here somewhere. It should be here somewhere. Let's say find by ignore case. Oops. Okay. You could use this. Find by name and ignore case. You could just do this. Okay, you could just do that. So you could say something like this one. So okay, forget the in part of it, but you could do this like find by name, ignore case. So I'll just show that to you in here. I could just say repository. So ignore case. So now the email, while he's searching, he'll ignore the case. That's a very important thing to do if you want to do some stuff in here. And that should be it. That's how you save data. Now how to add this one, AWS. I'm going to go to AWS, go to my account, my console. I mean, this is so simple. Just go to RDS. Okay, there's the relational data storage. You can see my DB instances. You can just go to instances. There's nothing running right now. Launch a DB instance. Make sure you select this one, because this is charged. Okay, this is free for us to use. Don't change anything. It's just fine, whatever it is. Again he makes it pretty good. Just go ahead, because 20 GB is free, by the way. So I'm just going to go ahead. Now this is a name. I'm just going to make it, I don't know, Spring, because I want to do that. My choice. Now the username, you can just keep any username. This is your root, right? So make sure this is kind of good. Password. I'm gonna say CSI file. Let's go next one. On this one, configurations. You don't need to change unless you know what to do. Make sure it's publicly accessible as yes. It shouldn't be no. Okay, it has to be yes, because we could, by the way, to have security, we could say something like the thing can be only accessed in EC2, so it cannot be accessed from outside your virtual the network in that place. We don't want to do that. Just create a new VCP security group. That's fine with me. Create a yes. Let's create a yes here. Database options. The database options. This is a database name. All right. This is just, you can create later, more databases later. But anyways, just click on disable for now. No preference. No monitoring. Enable auto miner version. That's always a good thing. So what you did here, if you just created a database and AWS is going to manage this database for me. I don't need to look for backups, no need to look for upgrades or stuff like that. No need to look if the database crashes or how much resources is using. It's just done. Now he says it's not yet available, it needs to build that stuff. But the point is that let me just show you in here. So since we are getting the resources, I'm recording, right? I'm recording, yeah. Since we are getting this resources from the what we call the environment, the only thing you need to do is, because this RDS is MySQL compliant, it's actually a MySQL thing. Sorry, what am I saying? It's MySQL. So you can just insert the host name in here, the database in here. You can just set the username and password in your environment variables, and you're all set to go. Let's see if he starts it already. If he has started it already, no, not yet. It takes a while to create it. So yeah, that's what to create of. So what I'm going to do now is, let's say I want to switch from this one to my local to the global one. So first of all, I'm just going to go into my environment variables. You can just, okay, let's just do one thing. Let's just keep the username and password same. Alright, so you can see that the user DB is media app and the password is this one. Okay, so what I want to do now is, whenever you create this instance, right, for this database instance, I'll create this new user, and I'll create this new password, and I'll create this new schema. So let's just stop when it save when it creates this one. Okay, so let's just get it one more thing. So now you see it's backing it up because it's a good practice and all. If I go to Spring now, it should be here. Yeah, so this is your endpoint, right? I'm going to copy this one, go to my MySQL workbench, create a new connection. I'm going to give it the host name as that, the username as which I gave. I'm going to give the password which I did while saving it. I'm going to call it AWS for now. Okay, double click. That's it. I'm in. All right, now you can see I've already created a database called a Spring. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to go to the users. I'm going to create a new account. I'm going to call it what was the thing that we called in our earlier one, in a local thing? Let's say it was media app. Okay, media app. Okay, and then the password is same. Apply. Done. Again, go to schema privileges, add entry, select the schema to be Spring. Okay, select all, apply. Done. So now this user media app has all the privileges on the schema, that is on this database called a Spring. Okay, so now let's just now if you see here, if I just go here and if I copy this again, I'm going to paste it instead of the local host, save it, and then just restart the application. Now if everything is correct, it should just start it. It should get started automatically. Okay, it works. Let's see if I go to this one. Okay, so this is there. Now this should be in here. Up, tables, student. Yep, it's here. So as you can see, it's not it's there in my AWS RDS thing and not in my local instance. If I refresh my local instance, actually there is no table here because the application is stopped. In my AWS, you can see it's already there in the table. So that's all it is, and everything should work just fine in here because yeah, that's all it is. So yeah, it's all the best for your assignments, I guess. Bye bye.